Ladies and gentlemen, Willard Bean!
Mr. Bean, you are to leave Palmyra.
There's nothing worse than an idiot Mormon.
Good day. We're missionaries for the Mormon Church. We're here to stay, even if we have to fight our way.
Come on!
Help me, please!
Maybe it's time to put out a challenge.
I am Willard Bean.
You idiot Mormon!
Run, Elder! Run for your life! You know me as the Idiot Mormon. But I'm also known as the Fighting Preacher.
Daddy,
Willard!
maybe you should just be nice.
So I'm supposed to like you because you give me pies?
Well, golly, that was a success.
I understand you Mormons believe in baptism by immersion.
Yeah, we do.
And we also believe in the laying on of hands.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Real Talk Friends. I hope by now you have a hint of who may be our guest, but maybe people don't know you from behind the camera. They just know the front of the camera creations that you have done. This is such a gift to have you here. My friend, T.C. Christensen.
I know, and I didn't know Scott, and now we're friends,
Yep.
and we're friends. This is all pack of friends. This is good.
It's going to be fun, and we may never stop filming. We may just keep talking and talking and talking because we have lots that we would love to hear from you on.
Okay, I better be good then.
You're going to be great. You're going to be great. I love that little splice of heaven that you've created here on Earth and some of your films. Not all of them, though. How many films have you done?
Well, if you I kind of separate that answer because really my career has been as a director of photography, and I've worked on hundreds of other people's films and projects and whatever, but it was only about 11 years ago that I decided, look, I'm getting old and I'm fatter and balder, and it's time. I've got some shows I want to make, and of those shows that I've made 5 feature films and quite a few short films.
But if people would read the credits on a number of projects, they would see that you are the man behind the camera on lots of...
That's been really mostly what I've done.
So what 5, real quick, just so our viewers know, what 5 have you done in those last decade or so?
We did 17 Miracles, and then Ephraim's Rescue, and then the Cokeville Miracle, and Love Kennedy, and then The Fighting Preacher is the most recent.
So 17 Miracles was your first one?
Well,
Where that you did as your...
where I formed a company and
Wow, you really came out of the gate strong. That movie is fantastic.
Yeah,
We've watched
it's been
that a
downhill
bunch.
ever since.
No!
It's bad.
What are you talking about?
No, they did
It was fun to be
Well, I've
involved
shared
with.
this with TC, I think, in our first in-person conversation when we were working on da-da-da.
I knew it was coming. There's no way that she's not gonna show that in an hour.
Listen, we had a great conversation, and I remember telling you exactly. TC's 17 Miracles film sustained my soul after Meg died by suicide. I literally, that was my go-to.
Wow. That's nice.
Saving place. And even now, if my well starts to fill, my faith well is just like on empty, it's time to watch 17 Miracles again.
That's very nice.
And
Okay.
and I think I speak for hopefully thousands that will say that the way you depict faith promoting story on film allows us to, wrestle a little bit, but come back to God and get a little shot in the arm. And thank you for doing that.
Well, it's true stories. That's what I decided that's worth doing is true stories. And so I'm just a little guy in between, but it's really those stories are what touch you.
So TC, that actually reminds me, I was researching a little bit and found a quote that you talk about stories. If you don't mind, I would love to hear you comment a little bit more on this. You said that I think story is everything. I would much rather see a very poorly done, cheap little movie that has a good story than some big Hollywood blockbuster with all the bells and whistles, but the story doesn't hold water. So tell us a little more about your draw, your attraction to storytelling.
Well, I'll answer that telling you a great quote I read years ago from Pete Seeger. He's the guy, he was a social activist and a songwriter, and he's the guy that wrote If I Had a Hammer and Turn, 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 quite a few really terrific songs in more of the 60s. Pete Seeger said, the key to the future of the world is finding the greatest positive stories and letting them be told. That's pretty. Wow. That's pretty powerful. Yeah. You know that shape, that positive stories or negative stories shape people's lives, attitudes, and the future of the world. And I just believed in that, early on, that if I was going to be doing this kind of a medium where many people get to see it and watch it and so forth, I don't want to come down on the side of films where you come out of the theater, either feeling like you need a shower or you had an awful time, you feel terrible about it. I want to have people feel uplifted.
And I learned that when we were working on The Decision That Changed My Life, because you were a film student at BYU, and who was your inspiration to kind of switch that part of your heart on to say, hey, I'm using film to uplift?
Do you know who I
do, but I'm asking it as a good interviewer because it's my favorite. I'm acting like I don't know everything that I
actually don't know.
Okay. So do you want to share?
I do want to share. My hero in filmmaking is Frank Capra. And Frank Capra was a great filmmaker, mostly the 30s, the 40s, and won several Academy Awards. He's best known for It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life, yeah.
Which, I think anybody's seen that and been touched by that. The reason why he's my hero is because he decided early on in his career he loved to tell the stories of the little person, the person who's just an everyday schmo, but is trapped in some situation and realizes if they'll stick to their guns and do what's right, they'll make a difference. And you gotta love that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that is such a thread through your movies. As you're saying that, I'm going through all your movies, all those 5, and I've seen them, and I'm just like, that's exactly what that is finding someone who really doesn't have necessarily a significant role to play in history that everyone would know, but someone that's done that exact thing, that's gone through a lot of hardship.
And fun fact, you won the Frank Capra Film Award, did you not?
That's very fun. Let's call it what it is. Yes, he was a judge at a festival and I had a film, it was a student film, and I got the Frank Capra Award at this festival. And he came to BYU when I'd been home from my mission about 2 months, and he came and showed films and talked about them after, and that just, man, that lit a fire under me to hear him and hear his attitudes about movie making.
And I think it's interesting that It's a Wonderful Life wasn't received great in its time. I mean, it has this shelf life that's been impactful, but that wasn't the message of the industry at the time, that he was putting out that uplifting content. What has helped you stay in that lane of, I'm going to use film for good and not fall into the trap of somewhat like Scott's quote that he shared of what you said of Hollywood and the bells and the whistles?
Well, let's get this straight right off. I'm not the perfect man, the holy man, and all this stuff. I've done films and things that I actually probably shouldn't have, whatever.
To put food on the table?
Because it's fun filming. I like making movies.
Yeah.
Whatever. And I'm not talking about big compromises, but my attitude of all of that is it's the same thing you learn in primary. Decide what you will and won't do now. And then when you're approached with an opportunity to do whatever it is, there's no decision to be made. You already made the decision way long time ago, and you go yes or no or whatever. And that has been, like, for example, I was offered to come in to interview to do a beer commercial. And I had no hesitation. I just said, yeah, I'm not going to do that. That's fine. And hung up the phone and didn't think a thing about it. I don't thought, oh, I just missed a great opportunity, whatever. It's just not going to be part of my life.
I love that answer.
Well, I'm intrigued with that just a little bit, TC, and maybe you've answered it already, but because I think a lot of us have gone through that, where at times in our lives for a variety of reasons, and maybe they feel like at the time they're worthwhile reasons and they're appropriate, but where we look back and might regret some of the decisions we made to some extent. What is some, just from your experience, what advice would you give to someone who might find themselves in that situation, but is having a hard time letting go of maybe some of their past decisions and still kind of beating themselves up about it?
Well, first, I would not judge. I just told you this, a beer commercial.
Yeah.
If, I have friends and who have worked on one. I don't feel like, oh, they're crappy people now and they're no good. I'm not going to judge them about it. It's all personal for me. And I think whoever might be struggling with this has to just deal with it on their own terms, what they can do to make themselves come to grips with it. And maybe it's repenting. I don't know. Maybe it was that bad of a thing that they feel like it's actually something that requires repentance. But who's my hero in filmmaking? Who is
Frank.
it? Oh yeah. Frank Capra. One of his great quotes. He said, "Only the morally courageous should be worthy of speaking to their fellow man for 2 hours in the dark." Now,
wow,
that says a lot about Hollywood, though, right?
Look at the. I don't sense that we get a lot of morally courageous, I don't know, people and the stories they're telling and so forth. But that's what Frank Capra said, and I just think for anybody, that's a good goal to kind of go toward.
Compass.
That's great.
One of the things that I loved in working on the decision was that we included one of the survivors of the Cokeville tragedy. And getting to know Katie, shout out to Katie because I know she'll be watching, that she wrestled with you bringing that story to film. It had been done before, but not in the TC magic way. And it was really your spirit, your authenticity, and your gentleness that helped her heart soften and trust you with a very tragic experience in her life. And I think that if you know nothing else about TC, that's what I hear more often than not. And I will always add my voice that you're the genuine deal. But I think that you've tackled some of those wrestles on film of what Scott just asked about, the people that have wrestled or regretted or made decisions that were hard, or I think specifically in 17 Miracles and then further on with Ephraim's Rescue, right? That sometimes you're the character in the film that is criticized or makes a decision that you're not so sure about. Do you want to talk?
I'm the person?
No, that you bring to film,
okay.
yeah.
I love that comment. You know why? You know why, everybody? The best films, you notice this, you go back and look at the best films, typically, when the masses watch the film, they will at some point say, this film is about me. Yeah. They're showing my trials and my problems and I'm going to watch this. This is my movie. If you can relate to people on that level, that is, a really terrific goal to have.
I love that.
I think that's great because, to be honest with you, TC, I have struggled generally with some of our church history in the sense that we overtell stories and we maybe, and this could be my perception, and I'm more than willing to admit I'm wrong here, but like we almost aggrandize people. And we do this just in general, like people in history, we kind of make them larger than life. And it makes it, for me, it's always been hard to relate to that because it's like, I would actually really love to talk to Nephi. I think he's a lot more relatable than we think he is. We just think he always makes the right decision. And I don't know if that's true. I just think he has an amount of grit and resilience that's uncommon. But I don't think Nephi would consider himself anything amazing or special. But in church history, sometimes I've struggled with these stories that get told in a way that it's so big and so grand that it almost, to me, I can't relate to that. And so it seems like you've made a conscious effort to really tell the story as the story on purpose. Is that kind of the direction that you've tell us?
I'll say specifically what I've made an effort to do is that when we have a hero, they have a weakness, they have a chink in their armor. Because that's us. That's, and I've actually had to, because I'm making films usually that are true stories, I've had descendants of those people, when they see what I'm doing with a story, that they've pushed back and said, oh, that guy wouldn't have done that. He was wonderful. And man, I can't, if you make the film without a chink in the armor of one of these people, then that's when you start feeling, oh, these people are so wonderful. How can I ever attain to that? As soon as you realize that they're normal people, but they got put in an extraordinary circumstance, and then they behaved extraordinarily. Maybe not for their whole life, but for that time. And the great example of that is Ephraim Hanks. Ephraim Hanks was not a perfect man. Man, I was studying his life. He got around. He did some stuff, but
he did what he needed to do.
Yes, and he saved people physically and spiritually, with that act, and throughout his life. But if you only made films about perfect people, we'd have the Savior, and that's the only person you could ever make a film about.
And even then, it would feel so unattainable, that what impact would he have on our lives? I love that insight. Yeah. One of the characters that is a real person is Levi Savage, and from 17 Miracles. And I always say, if you're on the disciples path, you will have a Levi Savage experience, where you're saying what you think needs to happen, and you get pushed back, and sometimes in a really public way are reprimanded. And you have an opportunity to either be offended and have a hard heart or move forward. I've had a number of Levi Savage experiences. I keep having them. And every time I'm like, really, God, this is how you're going to help me become like you? Like, not this way. This isn't fun. Have you had that experience? And what advice would you give to those that may find themselves in the middle of a moment where you speak up and everyone criticizes, but you're proven right, and then no one's around when you're proven right? There's no party or parade for that.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know the answer to all that kind of stuff, you guys. I'm
whatever.
Film.
He's a little too humble, let's just say.
I will tell you that quality that allowed Levi to do what he did is humility. And you go and read President Benson's talk on pride. It's the opposite. And you can pretty easily see where you want to be. That doesn't make it easier. But at least I think if you get it, I get that's how I should be. Now I can try to be that way. But I have no insights into specifically how to tell you how to do that.
Well,
wait, I am a holy man. What am I talking about?
Oh yeah, that's right.
I can tell anything. I can convert the gospel.
But you just proved my point. You have that humility. I think I'm on the earth just to remind you that you're T.C. Christensen.
Yeah,
and that you've created some amazing things. Do you want to ask your famous question?
You're gonna hate this next question.
I set you up exactly. This is Scott's favorite question.
No, this is really because I really do believe that using our talents and gifts and exploring those and maximizing those is really a way we worship. It's how we show gratitude to God because they're from Him, right? And so I think about, we see T.C. Christensen at this phase of your life, but my favorite question is really this. What are some of the unique gifts and talents that you have that have really helped you to, be the best version or be, the TC that we see now? But looking back, what are some of the unique gifts and talents that you've had that have really blessed you?
Well, I have fantastic hair. That's right off.
Aside from...
Everyone's adjusting their screen. They're like...
Who's he talking about? You know what? I don't know. I'll just tell you a couple of things I think of with that. One is, I do think that I have a sense of story. And I mean, how many times have you've been to a movie and you come out and you go, who thought that was going to be good? You know, the story, it just didn't grab you. You didn't care about the characters, whatever. And not that I nail it every time or whatever, but I really, anyway, I think I have some innate sense of the story. I'll tell you what else has been really terrific in my bald-headed life is I had a great upbringing. My mom and my dad were terrific. There were 10 kids, 10 of us, and I have so little of anything negative to say about all of those years. They created an environment where we were told you can do whatever you want to do. And you're smart and you can succeed, and just all those kind of things. I had a roommate in college who was really struggling with a lot of things, and one day his parents came over, and I'm in the other room, but I can hear them talking, and they were telling him, "You are so stupid. Why are you doing that? That's so dumb." Da, 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 da. And boy, it really made me go, "Mommy, Daddy, you were terrific. You created an environment for us where we could all."
Foster the creative spirit that you had. They were like, do whatever you can do because we back you.
Yeah, it was very much that way.
I love that. Another talent I think you have is well, if we were meeting in church, what's the calling you love that you've had forever?
You know too much.
I'm sorry.
La, 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 la,
He
la,
plays
la,
the
la,
piano
la.
in primary.
I got pulled out right now, but yes, it's the best. It's really and we rock, baby.
I was gonna say,
can you imagine?
I feel like we need a camera of that.
Yeah,
just
we
live
need some
stream
B-roll.
primary.
Some B-roll of TC in primary playing the piano, and you love being in there. And
yeah, it's great. And my wife's a lot of the time that I've done that, she's been the chorister. And it's just, how do you beat that, being in those with the little rat kids in there? And I've kept a journal all these years of the funny things that they come up with. I've got to get them into some movies at some point.
So your quality, I would say, that you didn't mention is you have that child heart still about you, that wonder, and maybe that's what allows you to tell those stories in the way that you do.
Yeah, maybe
You also gave me advice, because when we sat down for the book project, I had just been called to be primary chorister, and I've talked publicly how completely overwhelmed, and I wanted to be a Methodist after that, because and you sat in your front room, do you remember this, in Bountiful, and he's like, Ganel-Lyn, it's just da, 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 da. It's not that hard. And I'm like, I know, but you're T.C. Christensen. Nothing feels hard to you. But it ended up being the greatest gift of my life to serve in that primary calling, because it healed my heart. Yeah, I never figured out how to lead the music well.
Let me see. Try it.
No.
Do it.
Let's do it right now. Where's the piano?
And that's my point, is like, God's fine if we show up with what our offering is. We don't have to. I mean, I never became the greatest primary chorister.
Yeah, but you endured to the end.
Yeah, and he's willing to work with what he's got. What are your thoughts as we go into 2021 studying the DNC? I feel like you've brought that human side, as Scott was mentioning, where we don't over sanitize and maybe sainthood for these people in our church history. I think the Willard Bean story to me was just amazing, because it was such a marathon. It was not a sprint in his mission service. Who stands out to you? What's maybe the story you haven't brought to film, or one that you have brought to film, as we go into a more in-depth focus on church history in the DNC, that would maybe help our viewers understand you're being okay with the fact that everyone has both the good and the bad?
Yeah, okay, but first, if you're going to talk about this year and what's coming next and whatever, I got to just tell you, I'm sick of 2020. I haven't been able to make the movie
He's
that
breaking
I want to make.
up with 2020.
I've had it with 2020. It's like, you heard that one about I've washed my hands so many times that the answers to my 8th grade math test are starting to show up on my hand.
I have not
Sick of
that one.
That's a classic
like that
TC
one.
right there, there.
Yeah, enough of that.
Yeah, you were supposed to start filming on a film
a few weeks ago we would have started.
I remember.
And whatever, that's fine. We, just like the rest of us, we have to deal with it, and we're going to push it to next year, and it'll be fine. I'll get her going. Okay, but you want me to comment about dealing with...
Well, you've really dove into the deep end on church history to bring some of those stories to film, whether it's Pioneer Stories and Ephraim's Rescue or 17 Miracles, or even the time frame of the Rebecca and Willard Bean story, which was a little bit later, but they had all the anti-feelings that were still in Palmyra, and then they ended up staying. What have you learned from studying these figures in church history that you didn't know before, and how have they helped you?
Well, I don't know, I've probably learned really tons of things, but the common thread is endure to the end. This life's going to be a blip when we're out of it, and see what a short thing it was, and I think we're going to feel bad if we, give up and don't hang in there and keep slugging like Willard did, and that's easier said than done. We endure to the end, but that's a guiding principle to me. I got to make sure that, when I'm laying there like this, gone, that I don't have all these regrets of why I didn't keep it up just for these last few years.
I wonder, TC, because you've talked about this a lot, just, as we've talked to you today, do you feel like that's a characteristic that you have as well?
Endurance?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know, maybe that I have have it strongly, but I try to have it. I'll tell you, high school athletics really helped me with that, with having coaches that would take no guff, and you better do this and you better do that, and that at that age really kind of instilled in me. This one coach always called it, you got to have intestinal fortitude. And I'd always sit there thinking, what about my intestines? What does he want me to do?
So
That's
when you get
weird.
sucker punched, you're like...
Fortitude. It's a great principle. You got to reach in your gut and just keep going and trying, and you know what to do. And athletics really helped me with that. And I obviously have the athletic body now to show how 60 years of abusing your body, you result in this.
You're awesome.
It's all right.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, too, I was thinking about, just as you were talking about resilience and enduring to the end and those kind of things, has there been a personal film project where maybe you were going through something individually or as a family, or you were having your own internal struggle where you found healing through a specific film project that really meant a lot to you to kind of put you back together at a time where you may have felt broken?
That's a really good question.
That's a really good question.
Was it a question?
It was do question.
Are you going to answer it, or do you want me to?
No, I just want to amen you on that. It's a really good question.
But here, I don't have any specific answer to it, except, let's see, how do I say this? If someone were to sit and go through my films, the dialogue is almost never from reality, because people don't write. I don't have a history of what people said. I make up the dialogue. I'm writing the dialogue. And if you go through and listen to the dialogue in my films, I'm talking. That's me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, those are my views on those situations and how you deal with it and so forth. I hope that at some time my kids and grandkids that they get that idea and go back and see that's what Grandpa thought. That's his view of life. And
wow. Okay, now I have to ask one more. I'm sorry, Ganel-Lyn.
No.
Is there one that, and this isn't even a fair question to ask because of how much you've written, but is there one in particular that just stands out right now that when you wrote it, you look back and you think, that one really captured how I felt. That really captured my thoughts and my feelings?
Well, I kind of have to say the latest one, because if I sit here and say, well, back in 1982, I made a good film, and that means you're snorting it. That's very distracting.
I'm sorry.
But it's kind of fun.
It's one of my favorite things to do. Yeah, it's a goal.
I will be crying in 2 minutes, so you're just going to get the range.
So if that's the way it is, if I'm going to go back and tell you about something, that means, your career has just gone, nothing. So I got to say my last one, and it was The Fighting Preacher. It was a great experience from start to finish. It was not a struggle to do. It just kind of all unfolded. So many times I think people that deal with artistic things are always, it was so difficult and the devil didn't want me to make it and I could tell and all that. I didn't any of that, man. Devil must have been on my side because it was just good. Boom, boom, boom. One thing to the next.
You almost got a snort out of me on that one. That'll
be a goal.
I know, let's do that.
Oh my gosh.
You know what? I think that I learned a lot I was one day on the set in The Fighting Preacher, and when I watched the behind the scenes, it changed how I see. When you answer that question that way, that's pretty remarkable, because the workings, the lighting, the set, we did one set, one scene, and it took all day.
It's boring, isn't it? Yeah,
He asked me as I left the set that day, why did you do this? I said, because I love you. That's the only reason. And I left that day thinking, I don't think God wants me to be an actress. And I'm grateful he calls other people to do that form of artwork and creation. But I think that's phenomenal that your answer was that it all worked, because there are so many moving parts to putting together a feature-length film. So I think that's extraordinary that you felt like God was in that. I'm not going to give Satan credit. I'm going to say it was God that made sure that went off without a hitch.
Well, that's I'm say Fighting Preacher, and to learn, one of the things that it's one of the best compliments I ever get is when somebody will see one of my films and they'll say, how could I never have known that story? That's such a terrific story. We have in our culture so many great stories. I would never run out of good stories to tell. And then I love that when people now they've got a new person to learn from, Willard and Rebecca Bean.
And I love that during that film, I was at the premiere and people are crying, but I love that you admitted that we're hearing TC's voice because people were laughing. And I think you strike that perfect balance of faith promotion and inspiration, which sometimes cracks open your heart. I heard from a lot of people that specifically on The Fighting Preacher that it brought home the idea, would I be willing to work that hard for that long in a situation where there was so much opposition, and then they were still laughing in the middle of the movie and having all those feelings come forward. And I hope our viewers can see that's exactly who you are. So if there was ever going to be evidence that your voice is felt in these films, we cry and we laugh.
Well, I'm going to tell you again, my folks, they were funny and they loved jokes, and they would tell them to each other and tell them to us. And early on, you got this idea of funny's good. I like funny, and in film, boy, funny disarms the audience, and they start relaxing, and this is going to have a sense of humor. Even though it might be a very serious subject, it's not going to be also serious and heavy.
Yeah.
Well, and that's interesting too, TC, as I was thinking about, okay, you've grown up doing film and creation, and in an industry that typically, I don't know if we stereotype it too much, but seems not necessarily to promote faith, and especially faith in Christ, faith in God, and kind of this trying to adhere to a moral compass, if I can say it that way. Hopefully I say that the right way. But because I think there's a lot of people, I work with the youth, I'm a seminary teacher, and so I see all these fascinating personalities. But you see Christ and you see divinity and you see beauty in all of these different personalities. And I think you're in an industry that a lot of people wouldn't peg as, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I know you love this. I can tell you love giving advice, so I'm going to ask you for a little bit more. But for those people who might not feel like they fit the mold, whatever that means to them, what is some of the advice? Because you've kind of lived outside of that. It seems like, if I can say, that you've kind of lived outside of the typical mold that a lot of us live in. What's some advice that you would give people who might feel like maybe I don't, maybe my talents and gifts don't fit in, and they don't, there's not room for me in this church, in this faith, and in this religion. Do you have anything that's guided you or that you've learned along the way?
Well, I'd say that I think all of us at some time or another, and maybe several times throughout our life, feel that way. That's just kind of the nature of life, that, you know, sometimes you just feel like, I can't keep up with that herd and doing what they're doing. I'm not one of them. But the truth is, I think it's kind of like, maybe you're familiar with this President Eyring story that he told, where as a young church, not general authority, but some bishop or so forth, someone above him told him, when you meet and deal with people, you know, act as if 50% of them, act as if they're having a crisis in their life, and 50% of the time you'll be right. I think it's more than that. I think
it's
most people are having problems, and that those problems can make you pull back and say, we're not the Molly Mormons and doing everything we're supposed to. We don't fit in this. And the reality is we're all like that. And if you can realize that and just endure to the end, just keep going. Next thing you know, you're dead and you did it.
What a great quote. Next thing you know,
We're
you're dead and you did it.
that.
I love that. That's so great.
Soon enough, you'll
I
be
appreciate
dead.
it though, because you kind of demystify it and you don't make it, like I listen to that and I think I can do that.
Yeah.
Like I can wake up today, I can do it today. And if it didn't go great, I can wake up tomorrow and do it tomorrow. You know, and I think sometimes that, I love that when you're in pain, I'm just trying to, like when you're in pain, sometimes maybe thinking too big can be too overwhelming, and maybe just simplify it to the here and the now, do what you can. And maybe that sometimes might be a perspective that can be useful.
Which is a perfect segue into one of my favorite scenes in one of your movies, which is in 17 Miracles, where this mother is done. She's like, I don't care how many movies TC does about enduring to the end. I am not enduring to the end. And she sits right down on the side of the trail and is like, I'm done. And her daughter chooses to stay with her. I've talked about it, I think, in a number of places on Real Talk. It had such an impact, the way you portrayed that on film, and how she was, first of all, not left alone. Her daughter was like, I'm not leaving her. Yeah. And then she has this miracle of the pan of food, if our viewers aren't familiar with this scene. And she's starved emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, on all the levels. And what we don't see later is that as she goes on, it's not like she got a special helicopter that got her to the valley. She still had hard days, but she could go back to that miracle moment. I think I was telling you one day about that, and you shared with me the backstory on her, that she had lost twins. Is that right?
Right as the trip began on the ship.
So you can see that she's like, I don't have, God, anything left. I'm done. And I think why 17 Miracles has been such a gift in my life is because it's true stories, it's true miracles. So if my heart is like, I'm too tired, and my brain's like, and there's no evidence that God's aware of me, I can watch that on film and say, these are all real. These are all real miracles that show that God is aware of us individually. Would you mind commenting either on that specific miracle or in your own life miracles that have helped you keep going on the trail?
Well, I'm going to try to quickly tell you my main impetus that I had to put that scene in the film, because I'll tell you, there were so many other things that couldn't make it into the film, and some that we shot that had to be cut, but that one had to stay. And one reason is that my grandfather had a very similar experience. My grandfather was named Henry Tanner. He went on a mission to the South, southern states in the 1890s. That was not an easy mission. In fact, it was Willard Bean's mission. It was, they were contemporaries. This was without food, purse or script. So they're just out there looking for things to eat.
With family back home, right?
Yeah.
Wife and children?
No.
Oh.
Single.
Oh, single.
Single ones. So my grandfather and his companion are walking down a dirt road in Georgia one day, And my grandfather looks over to the side of the road, and there's a pie, just like in the movie. It's a pie. And he starts toward it, and his companion says, "Stop. Don't eat it. It's poison, or it's been set out to trick us or something. Don't touch it." Well, my grandpa felt about food the way I feel about food. And he said, "Forget it, I'm eating it." And he went over and sat there and stuck his fingers in the pie. Pretty soon his companion came over, and they both sat there, and that was their meal for the day, was that pie. Only to find out weeks later that very day back here in Salt Lake, his mother had baked several pies. She put them in the windowsill to cool, and when she came to retrieve them, one of them was missing. It was the exact type pie. And that's really basically what the Miller story, that was Louisa and Marianne Miller that happened to, that you're referring to. It's the same story. And I've heard it told before, if you can tell some kind of a miracle or an experience that happened scripturally or whatever later, and then something else that relates to it more in our time and maybe in your time, there's a cementing factor that happens where you maybe start to realize this isn't a fluke thing, this is one of the ways God works. So anyway, that's why that's there.
I hope someday you put that on film. That's for all the missionary moms out there, right? And just for each of us to realize that your act of service may in some way God uses to bless someone you love that's far away, but that his mindfulness and awareness of us individually, thank you.
And I don't think that the way either of those worked, the Miller miracle or my grandfather's miracle, was that God, zapped a pie to come to them. I think somebody on the earth that loved the Millers very much baked a pie that day. And it ended up missing. And I don't know the way it gets there, but that's how that pie got there. It's because of somebody that was looking out for them, probably made a pie and was praying for them. And
I love that.
Okay, now I got to ask another. I don't know if you have an answer to this one either, but I'm just thinking of a theme that you have, 17 Miracles, and then with this story as well, just this theme of ministering angels, to however that can be defined in a lot of different ways. Do you have any thoughts just regarding God's use of angels in our daily life?
Well, I do think that if I can portray on film some of these instances, like we've just been talking about, and I'm not making them up. And I'm not sitting here hey, what'd be cool? Is these are historical record journals, that kind of things. That tells the audience, you know what? God is out there. He's watching out for us, and he has ways. And maybe I haven't had that experience, but he's there. And if I keep trying, maybe I'll have an experience like that, or maybe I have had an experience like that, and I just didn't even recognize it. I have loved trying to bolster people, like I've talked with Pete Seeger and A Positive Story, to give them things to hold on to that they feel better as they get up in the morning and move on with life. Wow, that was good. Did you guys get that? I hope that got recorded.
Don't edit that out.
Whew.
No, I think that's exactly that's the exact feeling I have from the projects that you've done. And I think there's so many examples in your films where you have shown that. And we live in a society where, for some reason, if you put it on film, people are like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand. Maybe they've heard it or read it, but they didn't see it. And I think that's the power of film, is that when you see that faith play out, the how, then all of a sudden, as the viewer, you're like, wait, maybe I can start to see it in my own life and pull from that inspiration. And you've done that. You've done that in a beautiful way. And I think about the fact that maybe we won't know until the next life, where we look back and go, oh, there was an angel, to answer Scott's question, and there was an angel. And thank you for giving voice to that in a more tactile way so that we can anchor into that.
Well, and then the supreme example of that is the Cokeville Miracle. You know,
Yes.
if you're familiar with that, because that's what the whole thing is that there were those kids, many of the kids saw or heard something and it saved them, and they've. You ever meet somebody from Cokeville, you're going to meet a good person.
Oh.
That
Our
town
mutual
has
friend.
produced
Oh gosh, Katie.
Very good people, and I think a lot of that is because they want to live their life in a way that says, God, I was worth saving. Thank you. I'm trying to do what's right and be good. Yeah.
We're smiling because we say, Scott says that often on Real Talk.
That's literally my most core testimony, is that I know I'm worth saving. I say it all the time because it means everything to me. It's like it's the way I align when I feel like I'm off and all of that. That idea of having experiences, which I've had, where all the evidence points to God telling me, Scott, you're worth saving. And look at all these things that have happened. And they're all little things, and I always call them you had to be there revelations. Because if I tell people the story, they're like, yeah, that's okay. Like, that's cool for you that God helped you that way. But for me, it means everything. It's literally evidence that I have heavenly parents who sent a Savior, and all of them have done everything and sacrificed all they have because they think I'm someone who's so valuable that I'm worth saving. And I love that. Thank you for that. That's a personal witness for me that you just used that line, because that's exactly what your films have done, is to show that God he wants to save this person, he wants to save this person, he wants to save it. And if he wants to save all these people, even though they struggle and they have wrestles, that if he wants to save all of them, then maybe he wants to save me. And that really means a lot to me, so thank you for saying that.
And I love that Cokeville Miracle, that shows, I don't want to say non-believers, but many of your films are, people that have already said, I've got skin in the game, I'm getting baptized, and now I'm going through this hard thing. Cokeville Miracle, part of what I understand is that many of those kids that were having that experience didn't know if they should talk about what they had experienced. Like, did I really see angels, and why was Grandma here? Grandma's already died, and why did this happen the way this happened? And it took time for many of them to say, I experienced a miracle, or I felt God there. And I think that's the other appeal of your films, is that no matter where your faith is at, come have the conversation, watch the film. You're willing to watch Harry Potter and Star Wars, you can come watch, even if you don't believe. Because I think Cokeville, you experienced those conversations and getting some of the survivors to talk about it, and they didn't always know they could talk about it, or did that really, really happen? Do you have any thoughts on that, on how to give permission to call something a miracle, or say you saw an angel and be okay with that?
Oh, I think that those kids should just, them or any of us, one kind of what Katie, who you talked about, she and I were not, I'm not going to say bashing heads, but she did not like me, and she did not want me around there. But the point that I kept making to them is, when the Savior healed the lepers, the 10, and only one came back, and the Savior seemed to have this attitude of, well, wait, where's the others? And he had said in other times, well, go and tell people, let them know. And I just felt like if they've had something like that happen and then they keep it too close, I don't think that does the world and God and his plan as much good as if you in some way let other people know. And that actually got a lot of those survivors, I think, thinking we were saved, we need to not be embarrassed of it and let the world know.
Well, thank you for sharing your testimony and faith here of that principle alone. That's why Scott and I do this show, because we want to put words on these feelings that sometimes we don't have words for, and that we hope when we sit around and talk about scriptures or talk to amazing guests like you, that it gives permission for other people to go out and have their own 17 miracle experience, or be a fighting preacher in their community, or whatever that is. So thank you for being here and being the man that you are.
So it's over?
No, we
We're
can
not
keep
gonna talk
we
more?
can keep talking, but I just wanted to share my love and
okay.
appreciation any chance I can.
You can end it. If you want to.
I hope nothing's edited out.
Well, if
of this
TC says to end, that's a
no,
wrap, right?
he's saying we can keep going.
Oh, we can keep going.
Yeah, you can ask.
We can
whatever
just go through each individual. I would love to hear just some more of those stories, but I find it all fascinating, and it makes me think. And we normally don't do this with our Friends episodes, but just it makes me want to invite our audience that if there's miracles that they've had, even though you had to be their miracles, that maybe other people might read and just be like, well, I guess that's good for you, but that maybe to go out and think, maybe this is a story that someone else needs to hear. And so if any of our viewers have some of those that you've been thinking, maybe share them on our Facebook page and let us know, and that might be something that could be really useful for others.
And share this episode, because the sage wisdom of the holy man, TC, I think you've said some things that, you need the wisdom of someone's life that's been well lived, and you have lived well, my friend.
It's a wonderful life, I tell you. It really, I have. It's just, I don't like the COVID deal. I don't like that I can't make a movie, but really, life's terrific, and it will get over this, and it'll go back to, I get to do what I really wanted to be doing here.
Thank you, TC. And thank you for watching another episode of Real Talk Friends. We love you guys. Hopefully there's been quite a few things in here that have been motivating, helpful, and useful for you in your study. And again, like Ganel-Lyn said, please feel free to share this episode. And thank you again, TC, for the time you've taken with us.